All right, I hate doing videos like this, but Geoff posted a 30-minute video about a concept that he completely misunderstood, and I had to talk about it. Hey, it's Mike. Thanks for tuning back in. So I try not to do very many reaction videos. I don't really enjoy them, and but it's been about a year probably since my last Geoff video. I don't know, maybe it was December, so 7 months. And he posted a video that is getting torn apart in the comments, and other YouTubers are reacting to it. And I watched it first thing yesterday morning, Thursday morning, and as soon as I started watching it, I said, oh boy, he got this wrong, and I have to do a video on it. But I was fully straight out yesterday. The video was his video about buy the card, not the grade. And he says this is dangerous advice from influencers. And apparently he just saw one tweet about it and made some assumptions about what it meant, and then turned it into a 28-minute vintage influencers are idiots video, basically. And so a lot of people think that Geoff does this stuff on purpose, and that it's some cynical ploy to get other YouTubers to talk about him and to get more views and more subscribers and more money. And that's possible, but we've also seen him edit out dumb things he said, things that he's gotten wrong from videos before, which tells me that this is not intentional. He just doesn't understand it and doesn't seek to understand it. And maybe he just doesn't have any vintage people who work for him to tell him, no, Geoff, you got this wrong. And he really needs like a vintage expert, a vintage czar, to tell him, to review anything, anytime he's talking about vintage, to tell him, you got to edit that out. You got that wrong. So let's start with, what is the buy the card, not the grade argument? The buy the card, not the grade argument is when you're buying a card, particularly vintage, because with modern cards, ultra modern, you want a 10 or maybe a 9. But with vintage, you want the card that looks the best, because if you're buying something in the 50s or 60s or even before, the likelihood of you being able to find a 9 or 10 are very, very slim, and then being able to afford them makes it even less likely. And so what you want is to say, okay, my budget is X number of dollars. Let's just say $1,000, even though I've only done that once in my life. So let's say you're looking at $1,000 card, and that card that you're looking for, $1,000, is roughly a 5 range. You don't want to go out and just buy a 5 because it's $1,000 and it fits your budget. You want to find a card that looks great because you're a collector. You want to display it, and you're probably hoping that your collection goes up in the future. And we don't know what grading standards there might be in 20 or 30 years. As collectors, we're thinking long term. And so you want a card that looks great. You don't want to say, I want a PSA 5. I want an SGC 5. That's important to me. You want a $1,000 card that's going to look great. You might find a 3 for $1,000 that looks better than a 7. This happens with vintage because the standards are so all over the place. So you might end up spending the same amount and getting a lower grade than you would if you just said, I want a 5. Because Dylan of Double D Vintage cites an example. I couldn't find it and I didn't want to text him because it's way too early for him. But he mentioned that in the same auction, an SGC2 or PSA2 of a Gaudi Babe Ruth maybe sold for more than a PSA 5 in the same exact auction, because the two looked much better. And that's what vintage collectors and investors are looking for. And yes, Dylan is an investor. I think we all are, right? We just don't, most of us don't think of ourselves that way because I'm not going out and saying, I need to have Mickey Mantle because he goes up in value. That's just not how I think. But we do hope that the collection goes up in value. So Geoff says, this is terrible advice. You should only buy 10s. And then he says, he does qualify by saying collectors are different, but we're really not. Collectors aren't different. We do want iconic cards, some of us. Some of us want, we obviously want 10s, but we can't afford them. Geoff then goes through a bunch of cards, and he says, from 2018 to 2025, these cards have gone up way more in value, and he cites the most iconic, most expensive cards in 10s. Wayne Gretzky rookie. Actually, he went with a 9 for the Wayne Gretzky rookie, I think. The Jordan 86 Fleer, He just cited a bunch of the most iconic cards out there and most expensive, almost all of them in tens, and said, in the last 7 years, these have gone up dramatically. So tens are much better, like 1,200%, some of them. And nines have only gone up by 500%. And eights have only gone up by 100%. And look, if my money doubles or quintuples, we get 5x my money in 5 years, that's great. Or 7 years. What Geoff fails to mention is that in those intervening years between 2018 and 2025 is that there was a massive boom. A lot of big money came into the hobby, blew these cards up, and then they came down. And so if you had bought a PSA 10 in 2021 of Michael Jordan's 86 Fleer, you're at about 25% of your money now, because you may have bought it for almost $800,000 and now it's worth $200,000. So the advice to just go out and buy tens of the most iconic cards, you're more likely to have a massive crash with your tens than you are with nines and eights, because the nines and eights aren't going to crash at that high of a percentage. Sure, you might have a bigger boom, but the tens are at a higher risk than the nines and eights. And he also talked about your collection should be smaller. I don't want to have a small collection. I want to have a lot of cards. I have a massive list of cards that I want, and athletes that I want to collect, or not collect necessarily, but get one card of. And so I don't want a small collection. I want a collection that I can afford, that I like, and I'm not hoping that everything goes up to $1 million at some point. Although it would be nice, don't get me wrong. So my point is that within each grade, so a 4, let's just say a PSA 4, there is a wide variety of potential conditions. You could have a 4 that's way off center. I don't want that. I have no interest in that. You might have a 4 that has really rough edges or rough corners, and some people aren't going to want that. I want a card that's very, very well centered, has great eye appeal. You might have a 4 that has some staining, it has color loss. There are a lot of things that could be happening that aren't acceptable to you, or that aren't popular in the eye appeal movement or own appeal movement, if we're talking about Dan's Vintage Baseball PC. So buy the card, not the grade. All that's telling you is to go out and look at the card before you buy it. Don't just say, hey, here's a 4 and that's within my budget, I'm going to buy a 4. It just doesn't make any sense. Maddie C, the Maddie C collection on Instagram, is starting some sort of eye appeal website. We don't know many details about it yet. We hope to soon. But we know that there is a big eye appeal movement. He always constantly is citing Mickey Mantle, 1952 Topps, PSA 1 versus another, a PSA 3, and the one looks better. And that's what people want. You want to see a card that looks great, especially an investment grade card. You don't want to just take a PSA 1 that has paper loss on the front when you can get a PSA 1 that looks great and maybe has a little bit of paper loss on the back that dropped its grade down to a 1. This whole movement is trying to encourage people to collect and not quit because they've been priced out of the market. Because you can get low-end cards with value that look great, but they have a lower grade. Geoff seems to think that if you can't get a 10, you shouldn't be collecting. And he talks about professional athletes coming into the hobby. Professional athletes want the PSA 10, the best of the best, he keeps saying. Yeah, of course they do, because they have a lot of money. The vast majority of us don't have a lot of money. The most I've ever spent on a card was $1,100. That's my budget. That's what I can afford. Well, actually, I can't really afford that much. That's why it was a one-time thing. But the vast majority of the people who are watching Geoff's channel are small-time collectors. They have small budgets. So some good comments were in there. Let's start with Greg of Midlife Cards. He said, as a content creator who commonly says buy the card, not the grade, I don't think you're accurately applying the meaning of that phrase. What it means is, just because the number says it's a 7 doesn't mean it's as nice as some cards that are graded a 6. Blindly, the averages you shared are true, but when vintage collectors say that, they're simply saying something different than what you just did a rebuttal for. Yes, well said, Greg. Double D, I already talked about Dylan a little bit, but he said, the future is bright for those of us investing in our collections by using our eyeballs to take advantage of the technical grading scales and or complete misgrading by the grading companies. Yes. Hi Pop Professor, another YouTuber. Lower grade cards allow us regular non-millionaire people to afford cards we would otherwise not be able to afford. Most of us don't have the kinds of funds to get into PSA 10s of these giant cards in the first place. Instead of a PSA 10, I'd personally rather have many different amazing cards in my collection. Yeah, me too. I know it may be difficult for someone like Geoff to believe, but some collectors don't prioritize pure investment value as the highest priority in our collection. Yes. Again, I want my collection to go up. But do I want to have 12 cards total and have them all be PSA 10s? No, I want to buy more cards. Mookie Chilson, another great channel. It is a bold strategy to tell your customers, buy the grade, not the card, but okay. You should require Cards HQ patrons to watch these 30 minutes before they buy PSA 9s at your store. You will save them so much money. And Mookie famously wants cards with pinholes in them. Juho, great commenter, all over here. At some point, Geoff mentioned, he compared it to buying high-end homes, which is some important context here. Juho says, so when I'm thinking of purchasing my home, I should ignore the affordable Victorian with charm in a top public school district and purchase the 15-bedroom in Beverly Hills that only has a $35,000 a year private school. Okay, I think someone didn't listen to the context behind it. Buy the card, not the grade. No thanks. I'd rather get punched in the taint. If you know, you know. And then Jeremy of SportsCard Live said this very well. I was surprised to see this level of misunderstanding of a core hobby philosophy like buy the card, not the grade, come from you. To be honest, I wasn't surprised by this. That phrase isn't about ignoring grades or not buying the best you can afford. It's about understanding the card's true condition, appeal, and value can't be summed up in a single number. There are technically 18 to 20 possible third-party grade labels, but in reality, condition exists on an infinite spectrum. Two PSA 6s can look wildly different. There are strong 8s, average 8s, and weak 8s, and these variances matter. A PSA 1 with perfect centering and rich color might sell for more than a PSA 2 or 3 that's faded and off-center, and we've seen that happen many times, especially in vintage. Buy the best you can afford and buy the card, not the grade, are not mutually exclusive. They're actually complementary. One's about budget strategy, the other is about discernment, which comes from experience and knowledge of the cards. The danger in oversimplifying this idea, as happens in this video, is that someone new to the hobby, and many newcomers start at your content, which is why this matters, might assume the grade on the label alone tells the whole story and end up overpaying for a card that doesn't deserve the number on the slab. That's exactly what buy the card, not the grade is meant to protect against. Yes. Curious what you guys think. Let me know in comments. Do you think Geoff is right that you should buy the grade, you should buy the slab, and not pay attention to the card? Let me know in comments. All right. First of all, you might notice different background than normal because downstairs is a mess as we work to change up some rooms and move stuff around. Hope to be in the new room in the coming weeks. It's almost completely cleaned out, so I might be able to do a video in there just empty before I paint and before I start moving stuff in. Remember, Hobbypalooza is this Sunday the 20th. I'm on at 2 p.m. Well, Hobbypalooza starts today, Friday, and it goes all weekend. I'm on at 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. on Sunday. I hope you'll join, watch, comment, give us grief for whatever crazy opinions we share. And yeah, looking forward to it. I will be doing a Clearing the Bases Sunday morning, and the National, I'll be there 2 weeks from yesterday at the National. I'm really excited about it. I'll see you guys soon. I hope you have a great weekend.